Do you know which Chief Justice this is? I'll bet that you don't. This is the 16th Supreme Court Chief Justice, William Rehnquist, who is remembered as one of the most successful Chief Justices of the Supreme Court. Rehnquist was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1924. His parents were William Benjamin Rehnquist, a conservative Republican that was a sales manager for a printing, equipment, and paper sales office. His mother was Marjorie Peck Rehnquist, who was a director for a small insurance company and a local civic activist. Rehnquist's educational career began at Shorewood High School, and then he went to Kenyon College before attending Stanford and eventually Harvard University. After briefly attending Kenyon College for one semester, Rehnquist joined the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II, where he never saw any combat. Rehnquist then attended Stanford University, where he received a Bachelor of Arts and a Master of Arts in Political Science. Rehnquist then attended Harvard University, where he received another Master of Arts in Government. Eventually, he returned to Stanford University and graduated from the Stanford Law School. During his time at Stanford Law School, he met Sandra Day O'Connor, who would later serve on the Supreme Court with him, and during their time at Stanford, they briefly dated. Rehnquist's professional career began as a law clerk for Robert Jackson, a moderate on the U.S. Supreme Court. Eventually, he moved to Phoenix, Arizona to begin a private practice. And from there, Richard Nixon won the presidency in 1968, and Rehnquist moved back to Washington, D.C. to serve as a deputy attorney general for the Justice Department. Nixon eventually nominated him as an associate justice of the Supreme Court. In 1986, when Chief Justice Warren Burger retired, Ronald Reagan named Rehnquist as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Rehnquist was involved in several landmark cases, including Texas versus Johnson, where he wrote a dissenting opinion on the court ruling allowing flag burning being protected by the First Amendment, and Kelo versus City of New London, where he wrote a dissenting opinion that allows local governments to force property owners to sell their properties to make way for private economic development that will increase property taxes. This was a violation of the Fifth Amendment protections of eminent domain. But his most controversial case was Roe versus Wade, where he wrote a dissenting opinion on the majority decision to make abortion legal. Interesting facts about Rehnquist are that during World War II, he was stationed in North Africa as a weather observer, and as a clerk, he encouraged Associate Justice Robert Jackson to support overturning Plessy versus Ferguson and supporting the concept of separate but equal. He was often referred to as the Lone Ranger because of his tendency to be on the opposite side of the majority in Supreme Court decisions. After 33 years' service in the Supreme Court, Rehnquist was diagnosed with thyroid cancer but refused to retire and remained Chief Justice until his death in September 2005.
Miranda versus Arizona, 1966. The Miranda versus Arizona case involves Ernesto Miranda in Phoenix, Arizona. This case started March 13, 1963 and ended June 13, 1966. It originated in Phoenix, Arizona. In this case, this young boy, not even finished with 9th grade, named Ernesto Miranda, was charged with rape, kidnapping, and robbery on March 13, 1963. He had a history of mental instability. During the police interrogation, he was not told his rights. He was under a 2-hour interrogation, and in his interrogation, he allegedly confessed to committing rape, kidnapping, and robbery. Once his case reached trial on March 27, 1963, the prosecutors played his confession and was sentenced to 20 to 30 years in prison. This case had gone to the Supreme Court since Miranda was not given his rights. He was not told what he says will be used against him. During his trial, he found out his confession was used, and he decided to appeal against the Arizona Supreme Court. He claimed that the police had unconstitutionally obtained his confession. On June 13, 1966, the Supreme Court had a 5-4 decision which stated the prosecution was not able to use Miranda's confession since he was not informed to his rights. Due to the Miranda v. Arizona case, it is now mandatory for police to state one's rights, now called the Miranda rights. These rights that explicitly state you have the right to remain silent, anything said can and will be used against you in the court of law, etc., are read to a person during interrogation, whether it occurs in jail, at a crime scene, or in the middle of the street.